Right, folks. So let's do our final chapter here of Unit 6 here. And this is about kind of the social side of the Gilded Age here. Because again, the labor strikes and all that are more economic in nature. But again, this is an era of very much a lack of sympathy towards anyone who is not rich. And so we're going to see how that is laid out in this unit here, as well as how that demographic is made up. Because again, there's plenty of poor Americans, but there are also others coming from overseas in this era, and we'll see how the response is different compared to what we saw back in Unit 3 with the old immigrants. All right, let's see. More textbook stuff, more College Board stuff. You get it. Okay, let's see what we got here. So, urbanization is the big effect on the East Coast. And for the major urban areas here, we see that there is a big swell where all these people looking for jobs, thanks to capitalism, are now going into the big cities. And that means that the rural areas are really drying up. So that kind of yeoman farmer lifestyle is now kind of being left in the dust. Uh, you catch that little joke right there, a little pun. So the other thing is that there is um, really a lack of infrastructure. Like there's way too many people in this era in cities that are not quite built for that. And so the cities are now starting to really buckle under the pressure. Uh, Filth is everywhere. Like the sanitation is not up to par. We see that the cities themselves, there's nowhere near enough jobs for this many people coming in. So a lot of people are going without and having massive unemployment problems. But it really does just depend on the class that you're in. For example, if you are lucky enough to be rich either by your own work or by birthright, you are able to move around. You have some level of social mobility here, as really shown by this cartoon here of sunshine and shadow in the same city here. If you're rich, you had the luxury of being able to move to another part of town. And we see that's part of exactly what the upper class is going to do. They're going to start moving away from the filth and segregating themselves to like more upkept areas thanks to having other rich neighbors nearby. So it's going to result in like exclusive districts of entire cities, luxurious mansions getting built next to each other. This is kind of the beginning of that idea of the rich part of town appearing now. And so there is going to be a lot of very obvious symbols of wealth in this era here. And we'll see more about that later. Because again, it was very much an era of gaudy showing off, those lavish ballrooms, those guest houses, and just literal gilded stuff in the Gilded Age. Um, during the for the middle class, again, these people are not rich, but neither are they struggling. So these people are often able to have some level of disposable income, which is awesome because it means that they are able to, enjoy their time. They're able to have things like a little bit of an amenity. They are able to, go watch a Nickelodeon show. They're able to go to the circus. They're able to go to the boardwalk in Coney Island and, play games. And so life was okay for them. Like it was really not as miserable as it sounds, especially if you're poor. Again, part of it is also because the overall quality of life is funny enough going up in this era. And that's just because of the march of innovation. We're seeing that now, thanks to industrialization, technology like the telegraph, telephone, electric motors are now being way more widespread. So little by little, places are electrifying, and it means that things are going up, even if things are still paradoxically really expensive. Uh, Meanwhile, if you're poor, it's a hard life. You're being forced to live in these tenement houses because that's the only thing you can afford. If you even have a house, you might be homeless. We see that people are just barely struggling to get by with any job they can find, and you just worked until you died. Uh, it meant every member of a lower class family had to work because no one could afford to take the time to go to school or even to sit at home. Like once you were able to stand and hold something heavy enough, then you were working. Child labor, whether it's on a, helping with a farm or whether it is working in the some kind of industry, some kind of factory. Yeah, kids were working at very young ages, and the ones that are lucky enough to go to school, it means that their families are doing better than they normally would, but they're substandard. So crime is on the rise, disease is on the rise. bacterial infections are everywhere because of the literal human filth. It is disgusting. And so this is all going to be try and be ignored by the upper class mostly. Like they're just going to try. That's one reason why they try to move away from the disgusting areas of town. But there will be a few trying to force change by reporting on these issues and actually trying to make the powers that be reckon with them. And part of that is the efforts of a muckraker. Now we saw that phrase in class, but if you can't recall, a muckraker is the first form of investigative journalist. They are actually going around trying to rake through the muck, the filth of society, and try and report on interesting stories so that they can try and force change. And so, in this era, the one that we're spotlighting here is Jacob Riis. He is actually a Danish immigrant here, and we see that he is a photojournalist. So he is behind the idea of really documenting the slums of New York City, the lower class area, these tenement houses, and the people that live there. And so he puts it all together in a collection, a book called How the Other Half Lives. And he's going to showcase this at exhibitions to upper class families. And so what we see is that these conditions, like just having it all filled out with photographic evidence, it does inspire change. And it helps at least with the actual sanitation side of things. We do see that the city is then going to take sanitation engineering way more seriously, and that's going to involve the a man named Colonel George E. Waring forming the White Ducks. It's a 2,000 strong unit of sanitation engineers who you might consider to be garbage men, but in reality, this was a very important job. They actually cleaned up the streets of New York, swept it dry. They burned different kinds of waste to make oil and things like that. They inspired the idea of kind of recycling different ideas, different things that we consume. And so, really, thanks to these efforts, it led to an era where sanitation engineering was seen as a respected profession, which is really cool because, think of all the filth that we throw away on a regular basis. It had to go somewhere. And aren't you glad it's not outside your front door? So, what else? We see that there is going to be meaningful change, but if it is changed in some way, it is unfortunately done so in a way that is designed to benefit those people who are getting into politics for their own purposes. One of those is the idea of these political machines becoming corrupt. Remember, these are the movers and shakers who get people from big parties elected. They actually do the grassroots work, get down in the streets and talk to people, get them to vote, understand what their issues are. But they're corrupt in this era. And so one of those is called Tammany Hall in New York. And this is a Democrat political machine. And the leader of it is a man named William Magar Tweed, also known as Boss Tweed. Now, Boss Tweed is a paradox because on the surface, the stuff that he's doing to garner votes is directly helping the poor in an era where hardly anyone was doing that. We see that he is actively giving out charity and coal and turkeys to poor people and to immigrants. He's networking with small businesses and trying to understand their needs and actually trying to help them. Now, the reason he's doing this is solely because it is a transactional relationship. They now owe Boss Tweed favors. And the way that they can cash those in is by giving him their votes. And what that means is that as the man in the middle here, he's kind of the one who is steering elections towards people that he wants to be in charge. All of the major city, like the New York City elected offices, were put there by Tammany Hall. And so we see that effectively he is going to use his position to enrich himself. He's going to steal a bunch of money from taxpayers and embezzle it. He's going to, cook the books and refuse to show people who audited him because he put them there in that job. He's going to basically use it as a way to make himself the untouchable person in New York City. And for a long time, it's going to work. Like, he is outright manipulating elections. He's the one that counts the votes. And so this man was in charge for a long, long time until Thomas Nast, a political cartoonist, is going to finally get the masses to turn against him by drawing cartoons depicting him as kind of a thug, like a gangster, a corrupt man taking bribes who is not a good person. And so opinion on him is mixed because if you were poor, you were probably a fan of his because he is actually helping when a lot of people were not into doing that. But if you believe in values like, integrity, he is sadly a not a great guy. All right. Anyways, I just love it because it's mafia tactics, but it's for an elected position, which is insane. Or is it? All right. What else? Let's see. We've got the last little bit to look at here is how immigration factors into all of this. And so during this era, we see the beginnings of new immigration. Now, you may recall our old immigrants from the 30s to like the 60s, more or less. That is going to be our German and Irish immigrants from Northwestern Europe. In this era, our new immigrants are going to be from Southern and Central Europe, plus China. So the main groups, Italians, Russians, and Chinese. Now, these are notable demographic shifts here because although they do have some similarities to the old immigrants, for example, they are probably in large numbers unskilled workers. So they are going to do the same thing that the old immigrants did, where they're going to go anywhere that there is unskilled labor. So anywhere that has factories, they're going to go. But they do have the added benefit of being able to move west now that the railroads are done. So either it is to help build those same railroads, or it is to go west and try and find work in those mining boom towns in places where they could be a miner or a ranch hand or anything like that. Um, Now, the biggest difference is how the pushback is going to manifest. And again, a phrase for that kind of xenophobia, difference of hatred of people from other countries is called a nativism. And so we see that the demographics are quite different this time. Because again, Irish and Germans are very similar in the modern day. We consider those all white in the modern day, but in this era, the differences were stark. But even then, old immigrants, they have a lot of similarities with British Americans. They would have roughly the same complexion, maybe the same hairstyle, or sorry, hairstyle, the same hair color and eye color. So the sameness on the surface looked it was very same. Now, on the flip side, the new immigrants, they are starting to look and sound very different here. The features are distinct because, again, a lot of new immigrants, places from like Italy, for example, they might have slightly darker skin. They might have black eyes instead of blue or, hazel. They might have kind of black curly hair instead of like the refined, kind of straight white or blonde hair of the old immigrants. So the differences are very apparent. And that's even more amplified with groups like Russians or Jewish people, or especially Chinese people. So we now start to see that thanks to this pushback, the concept of what it means to be an American as a race is beginning to appear. And that is the idea of a WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. So if you are not one of those things, if you're not white, if you're not of British descent, or if you're not a Protestant, then you are an outsider. And so what we see is that these demographics are very distinct. And it means that these new immigrants are, as a whole, going to refuse to assimilate as quickly as the old immigrants did. One, the culture is that much more distinct, so it's actually very difficult to do that. But two, there is now a greater sense of pride in their own culture, and they are going to try and maintain that in America as much as they can. So, both as a representation of their own pride among pushback and as a necessity because many of these people were not rich, we will see the beginnings of ethnic enclaves. So, if you've ever heard of places like, Little Italy or Chinatown, those are all examples of stuff like that. Places where immigrants would come together and they would band together for safety, but also economic necessity. And in doing so, the areas would start to conform to the culture of their homelands rather than of America. So, one of the most notorious ones, sorry, notorious, one of the most iconic ones pictured right here, the San Francisco Chinatown. It is fantastic. Go there if you ever get the chance. Um, but anyhow, we see that this kind of pushback is among the old immigrants as well. Many old immigrants feel like they have been set up and they don't like the idea of a new group coming in and demanding handouts. In their mind, is how they see it. And so we see, the irony is not lost here because many of these old immigrants were probably also destitute when they arrived here, but that was so long ago. They're different people now. And so what we see is that the result is going to be a cultural pushback that will then manifest politically. We'll see the same kind of roadblocks that we saw with the voters in African American South, just like the poll taxes and literacy tests. We'll see similar bans trying to be used to prevent immigration, such as the Immigration Restriction League trying to ban illiterate people from coming, or ideologies like anarchists. People of mixed ancestry are going to be seen with suspicion, and eventually these will manifest in concrete laws. And the ones on the receiving end of this are going to be Chinese people via the Chinese Exclusion Act. So it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a total ban on Chinese people, and it will be in effect for 10 years before it gets renewed, and then another 10 years before it gets officially made permanent. And so it's going to be a total ban on Chinese people until literally World War II. And so, and the only reason we do that is because suddenly we're at war with Japan, and so is China, coincidentally. So, really, it just shows the sheer nature of the nativism in this era, but it's also a huge demographic shift. And it's one of the reasons why Chinese culture to this day is still seen as so foreign in America. But again, there's also other things like how the languages don't have a common ancestry, like in Latin or Greek. It's complicated. There's many cultures out there. Ain't that a wonderful thing? So during this era, the only people that are helping immigrants are very, small time. Again, Boss Tweed is kind of the only person in the actual government that is helping out. And again, he's doing it in a crony kind of way to extort them for favors later. But we saw the social gospel is getting involved. They are helping with this concept of, improve life so that we can all be equal before God and then the rapture can finally happen. Hallelujah. We see that there are charities like the YMCA showing up. The Catholics are getting involved now. The Pope Leo the 13th, he is a fan of workers, and isn't that awesome? One of the most noteworthy is the idea of the whole house, which is a settlement house. And those are designed to help immigrants just get accustomed to America, both with the actual mechanics of America as well as the culture. So, they're going to give immigrants English lessons. They're going to give education to their kids so that they can get a job quicker and learn English faster and earlier. They're going to teach them about American values, democracy good, and they're going to teach them how to, gather with other people, try to find other groups from similar backgrounds, and that way they have a little safety net of people who are of the same culture, more or less. And so this is an act done by Jane Addams and other educated women, which is pretty awesome because it does show that continuity there from Unit 4 of women being social reformers as the angel of the house, the moral center, if you will. Um, so this whole era is a real mixed bag because it really kind of puts the idea of strain of is America really that idea of a great melting pot? Because Americans love to tell themselves that truly all immigrants are welcome here. And that phrase comes from this era here by a Russian Jew who was one of these new immigrants. But as we see, the era is full of contradictions and pushback, and a lot of this can feel very similar to other eras where immigration was seen much less favorably. So, whether or not it is a melting pot is up to you to decide. But this is the era we get the Statue of Liberty from, and it represents welcome of immigration and democracy and abolition, and it's pretty awesome. All right. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there right now. Uh, Feel free to reach out if you have any other questions about Unit 6 or any other units. Happy studying for your terms quiz and for your final. And you're almost there, folks. Just another couple days until Christmas break. All right. Have a good night, folks. Peace out.